All right, what up, guys? We are here with PsycHacks. This is going to be a very, very interesting discussion. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the invite, Alex. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was researching you, you're a clinical psychologist, and I'm assuming you were making like pretty good income doing that. But then you started a YouTube channel, which is kind of unique. Like, what made you start? What was the journey behind you starting your channel, PsycHacks?
Sure. Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist licensed in the state of California. I had a fairly successful private practice before I started PsycHacks. My practice specialized exclusively in men's mental health. So all of my patients were men. I saw that there was a desperate need for that where I live in the Bay Area, California. I think there was one other therapist in the metro area of 3 or 4 million people who had a similar speciality. So definitely a lot of demand, not a lot of supply. And you're right, I had a fairly full practice roster in those days, but I decided to launch PsycHacks for a number of reasons. One of them was I saw my patients get better. I saw them improve their outcomes, their quality of life. They resolved a lot of their depression, their anxiety. They had more successful, satisfying relationships. And I thought, well, that's great, but at the same time, that's only 30 people. I mean, changing 30 people's lives for the better is no small thing. But I figured if it worked for these 30 guys, they're not necessarily special or unique. It might work for 30 million guys. So I decided to launch PsycHacks as a platform to bring some of the perspectives and interventions that were working in my clinical practice to a wider audience. That was sort of my motivation to do so.
Can you give some examples of the things that you were doing that were helping guys when you had your private practice?
I mean, a lot of that is in the channel. So I don't usually hold back when I create my content on PsycHacks. A lot of it has to do with just sort of being direct and honest with people. And I think that there's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of dishonesty. There's a big tendency in therapy and therapeutic culture to be non-directive, to be insight-oriented, to be more feelings focused. I'm more interested in outcomes. I want to see behavioral change and I want people's lives to get better. And I don't think that you need to spend months or years in therapy trying to make that happen. You should know from the very first session that you're moving in the direction of your goals. And if you're not, then you probably should reevaluate that relationship. So I talk to people on all kinds of subjects: money and finances, spirituality and faith, love and relationships. In general, I find that most therapeutic issues boil down to problems that people have in their relationships. When people have good, supportive, loving relationships around them, they tend to thrive, even if they go through difficulties, which we all do from time to time: money difficulties, health difficulties. And I've also found that when people do not have those relationships around them, even if everything else in their life is humming along perfectly, they tend to suffer. So the quality of our relationships generally dictates the quality of our lives.
Yeah, fair enough. In my opinion, the big part of the problem for why a lot of people suffer and they don't get better and they don't take good advice is because they have a victim mindset to some extent. You mentioned that like you would be more direct in terms of giving like, hey, this is the problem, this is a solution. But what do you do with like a big part of the people who just like they don't truly deep down inside they don't want the solution, they just want to be a victim? Like how do you handle a patient like that?
Well, there are a lot of folks out there in the general public. I didn't actually experience a lot of them in my private practice. There were a few people who were just stubbornly identified with the role of the victim, and to be honest, that was not a successful therapy. It's not possible to grow from the place of a victim. You have to be willing to abandon that position in order to move forward in life. And some people feel like, as compromised as that place is, the place of a victim, it's likely going to be better than the shit they'll have to go through to actually make their lives better in a reality-based way. So there is that problem, but there's another problem, which is people are loath to tell folks the truth. And that was more likely the more common problem I experienced in working with those guys. It's not that they were mired in a victim mindset. It's that, like, all of their friends and family wanted to take care of their feelings, and so they weren't telling them the brutal, honest truth that they needed to hear in order to move the needle forward. So for example, a lot of the guys would start their therapy or their consultation saying, "Doc, please hurt my feelings. Like, tell me what my parents, what my friends don't want to tell me because they don't want to hurt me. But clearly I need to know it, because if I knew how to get what I wanted, I would have had it by now." So a lot of people actually don't have good knowledge. They don't have the perspective and the information that they need in order to successfully navigate reality, because we've been fed a whole bunch of horse shit in a lot of different domains of our lives.
That's interesting. I guess there's like sample biases because in my community, which is like, the pickup community, I notice a lot of guys who do mostly have the correct information, but for some reason they're not taking action on it. They're procrastinating, they're thinking of excuses. They know that if they want to get better at talking to girls, they have to go out there and talk to girls, right? It's not like they don't know this, but they're not going out and talking to girls. And quite often I found that, again, not with everyone, but with a significant portion of people, it just boils down to they see themselves as a victim. I mean, I think, in my opinion, feel free to disagree with this, but the whole red pill movement is largely a movement of victimhood. It's like, oh, men have it so rough. It's so hard to be a man nowadays. And there are legitimate challenges to being a man in 2025. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of it is, I see like a victim type of mindset. It's like, let's just talk about the pain. Let's talk about the problem. Let's never really focus on the solution. Right.
I have to disagree with that. There's certainly sections of the red pill community that I think meet that description, but I think most of that is a seeking after recognition and just wanting to have their experience validated. It's like, this is a real experience of being a man in contemporary society, and I just would like that to be recognized. And in the absence of validation or recognition, people feel invisible and increasingly disempowered. And that's not very good for their emotional or mental health. That doesn't mean that everything has to be celebrated and we have to sing everyone's praises from the rafters if they don't deserve it. But I do think that a lot of the red pill movement is a desire for men's difficulties and issues to just be given the light of day.
I would say, though, that like your experiences are filtered through your biases and through your frames and just how you view the world. So two people can have the same exact experience and come away with two different stories.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like, and I see what a lot of it is like. Let's take something as like, a girl flaked on. Like, I have a date with a girl on Friday and she didn't show up, right? So the way I would look at that, and I would be like, she probably either got busy with her friends, she forgot, she had cold feet, something along the lines of that. I don't really know what the issue is. A red pillar might look at that and be like, well, clearly she met a richer guy and she's hanging out with a guy who has more money than me.
It's possible.
It's like the same event, but two different interpretations. And I think that like how you frame things is super important, whether it's a positive framing, negative framing, neutral framing. And I think, like, again, not to make this a whole thing about the red pill, but I see with the red pill a lot of very negative framing, a lot of jumping to conclusions for which there's really no evidence for. Like, for example, okay, another situation is like when a woman leaves a man, right? Like, they're in a relationship, the girl leaves the guy. Like, the first question they ask is, how much money do you make, right? The assumption is that like you probably don't make enough money. My assumption would be like, okay, there was probably turbulence in the relationship, there was miscommunication, there was feelings of resentment, right? But that's not where their mind goes. So do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we might be looking at different corners of the red pill. I do think that exists. I tend to look more at the academic evolutionary psychology perspective of the red pill as opposed to the PUA community.
You're looking at like David Buss and stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
We get terms like hypergamy and assortative selection and things like that. So I have maybe a different experience set with the red pill space online than.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I don't think David Buss is a victim or anything like that. Yeah, I'm looking at more of like Fresh and Fit and like those types of people. So okay, so that explains kind of the difference. We're just looking at different.
But you're absolutely right. Everything that we experience is filtered through our own beliefs, judgments, and perceptions. And on the whole, neutral judgments are probably closest to reality, even closer than positive judgments. And neutral judgments are generally, it most likely doesn't have to do with you, because most people are so self-absorbed with their own narcissism and set of problems and circumstances that they don't really have the bandwidth to care too deeply about anybody else. And that it just sort of is what it is. in order to actually see and attend another person, you kind of have to have your own shit in order enough to create space for another person to come into your consciousness. And if your mind is really active and it's clouded with troubles and anxieties and fears and worries and depressions, you just don't have space for reality and other people to intrude inside of you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. What I'm an advocate of is something I just pulled right out of my ass. It's called cautious optimism,
Okay.
where you are generally optimistic, but you proceed with caution. So you don't like, let's say, for example, you meet a girl and you have a really good feeling about her, right? You don't jump to a negative conclusion, which is like, whatever, it's probably not going to work out. A neutral conclusion would be like, I don't know what's going to happen. You can be optimistic about it, but you proceed still with caution. That's kind
I
of like,
recommend that. I'm in an episode called "We'll See," which is the infamous phrase of King Louis XVI when he would hold court. People would come to him with all kinds of proposals and recommendations, and he would just sit there silently and respond, "We'll see." Like you couldn't get a yes or no out of him if you tried. And I think that's a really good perspective to maintain, especially in the early stages of courtship. Like so many things can go wrong, or starting a business, or launching any kind of new project or endeavor. It's like, we'll see. We'll see how things turn out. And of course, you need to have hope, because that motivates energetic activity in the direction of your goal. If you don't have hope, why would you try? So that makes sense. Why you just kind of hold the outcome lightly. It's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. It can take years or decades to master that.
yeah, I think like one of the biggest determining. I'm not the one that came up with this. I've heard other more successful people talk about this, but the biggest determination of success in any area will be like your grit, your willpower, your ability to withstand setbacks, essentially. I know for myself personally, I've always kind of had that. But I don't know, like, what is your opinion? Do you think this is something like, can you take a guy who has like no grit and, get him to a point where he has a lot of grit? Or is this something that's like kind of like set in stone, you think?
I
More or less?
think it's a temperamental thing. Some guys are going to have more grit than others, but I do think that you can cultivate grit if you really want to. I mean, David Goggins is a great example of that. That guy
Oh, that's
was
true.
a 300-pound exterminator
Yeah.
when he was 19, and
Whose
he
dad
became,
abused his mom and was a pimp. Yeah.
yeah, and he became this huge badass. So it's like clearly, did he have that grit inside of him when he was an overweight loser? His words. I don't know, but he certainly was sufficiently dissatisfied with his miserable situation that he was willing to do whatever was necessary to get out of it. And I do think that he probably did not have the grit to run ultra marathons when he first started.
Yeah.
And he cultivated that grit by putting himself in progressively more challenging circumstances that whetted his growing edge, as it were.
Yeah. No, that's true. I
Yeah,
doubt he had
without
it.
grit, I'm sorry to interrupt, but without grit, people don't get very far
No.
because the path to success is so indirect. It's littered with setbacks and disappointments and false starts. If you don't have the resilience and the determination to see it through, you might as well just not start.
Yeah, I think, I think a problem a lot of people have is they give up way too easy.
Sure.
I like to share this story that, like, I have a great relationship now, and like, not to brag, but I've had some success with women, just put it that way. But initially, my freshman year of college, when I was a virgin, I went out for 9 months straight with zero success, like just constant rejections.
Oof.
But I don't know, like I was able to withstand that, I guess.
Rejection is very important. It's like I used to be an actor. Some folks know about that. And actors live in rejection. You get told no 99 times for every time you get told yes.
Yeah.
And the rejection, like pickup, is very personal because what are you selling? You're selling your face, you're selling your voice, you're selling your presence. It's not like a painting that you could kind of create some distance between you and your creation. You kind of are the creation, just like you are what you're presenting to a woman when you approach her at a bar. So it's very easy to get identified with the rejection. But I do think that it's very useful to build a kind of emotional callus around rejection so that it no longer serves as a disincentive to try. And once you go through 100, 200 rejections, you get to a point where that is just feedback. It's not personal. It doesn't necessarily have to be painful, and it's certainly not permanent. And all it is data. It's like 0 or 1. It's a 0. This woman doesn't want to continue this interaction in the spirit in which I would like to direct it. game over. I can find someone else to play. And I think that's a pickup strategy. It's basically like polarize, figure out whether she's a 1 or a 0 as quickly as possible so you can move on to where the ones are, because they have to exist somewhere in the world. Like, certainly there are more
I hear
ones.
Canada has a lot of them. I hear you have to go to Canada for that.
There's certainly a lot of ones for some people over others, but like, just go find someone who actually wants to play with you.
Yeah.
And just because, if a handful of women didn't find you attractive or interesting, that's not a sufficient data set to build robust generalizations upon.
Yeah, what I say actually in regards to that is the girl's not rejecting you. She's rejecting her perception of you. You've
Clearly.
talked to a girl for 30 seconds. She doesn't know you. She's just
right.
rejecting her perception, which is filtered through her biases, what her last date was like, what the last guy who approached her was like, what mood she's in, all her troubles. It's filtered through so many things.
Yeah, it does mostly have to do with her, though you can control a little bit. It's like marketing. It's like, how are you showing up? What's your vibe? What's your outfit? Things like that. So it's important for guys to control what they can control and to surrender those other things.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. You can optimize a lot of things and increase your success rate. But at the end of the day, she's still not rejecting you. She's rejecting her perception of your marketing, I think is a good way to put it.
Right.
I think that's a healthy mindset. All right, let me jump to this. What would you say are like the big challenges men face in modern society and relationships?
Well, I do think that they face different challenges at different stages of the relationship. Like single guys, when they're in the sexual marketplace actively dating and looking for a relationship, I think the main struggle that they face is, let's say, female entitlement. And I do think that women tend to be more delusional than men these days about what they expect to get out of a relationship. And I think that this is harmed by the fact that nowadays, through dating apps and especially through social media, everyone is just like 2 Kevin Bacon connections away from every other person on the planet. So you could actually get access to royalty, athletes, celebrities, billionaires, super high status men that would be gate kept behind all kinds of personal secretaries and agents and managers and guards and things like that. And some of these women might also be able to access their attention and even short-term sexual relationships, which can give them a distorted idea about what their sexual marketplace value might be for a long-term relationship, which is
Can I just jump in with something real quick before I forget this thought? I just want to clarify because I've heard people talking about this, but the majority of women don't want to fuck a random celebrity, right? This is like we're talking about a small percentage of women. Like, would you agree with me on that?
I don't know about that, man. It's like those celebrities have very high body counts.
Well, they do. Yes, sure.
There are billions of women in the world, but those celebrities might be more limited by just their free time and their stamina than the amount of willing women to have their experience.
No, I think there's definitely a sizable chunk, but I think that like a girl who fucked, I don't know, let's say Leonardo DiCaprio is probably could be potentially the same girl that fucks like Michael Jordan or whatever, or whoever else, LeBron. So there is definitely like a sizable chunk of women, maybe 10% or something like that, who are fucking most of the celebrities. And but like I think like just in my opinion, the average girl, just from the street interviews I've done, might be intrigued by the concept, but wouldn't actually follow through on fucking like a random celebrity.
I might have to disagree with you on that one. It's like there was a recent interview that appeared on Softwood Underbelly where Mark interviewed a longtime rock and roll groupie, and she said that she lost her virginity to David Lee Roth at age, I think, 14 while he was on tour. And she basically rationalized it. Well, it's like I either lose my virginity to David Lee Roth or Calvin, my high school boyfriend. So I have to lose it to somebody. Why not lose it to David Lee Roth, as it were?
But this is a massive like sample bias because she's a groupie, right? That's not like the average girl.
It's true, but she wasn't a groupie at that point. I mean, that was her first sexual experience, and she went down that pathway. And we have to presuppose that not everyone who starts finishes in the same spirit. But in my experience, personal and professional, it's women are much more likely to give famous and powerful men access to them for short-term sexual encounters than you might think.
Yeah, maybe we don't even disagree that much. Like, I think that if you give a woman a choice, a binary choice, right? Like just the average girl, you can have a famous celebrity or you can have a random guy from your high school. She will, vast majority will pick the celebrity. But I think that for like a lot of girls, like their Instagrams are set on private, for example. That's really common. Or they're really not big on social media. Like they're living normal lives. They're not all like in the DMs of like Leonardo DiCaprio. Like that's a small percentage of girls who are very active, and there's still even 1% of 300 billion people is a lot of people. That's like 3 million people, half of them being girls, like 1.5 million girls. Still a lot of people, but yeah,
You're absolutely right. It's not all women, but you have to understand that kind of tendency does exist um, at every radius of the marketplace. So it's like even in high school, the majority of the girls were interested in the top like 2 or 3 most popular guys. So the sexual experience wasn't even normally distributed across that population. So there is faddishness in female desire. And in general, women want what other women want, which
sure.
changes all the time, but women always want something. And women are looking to other women to know what is safe and correct to want at any given place
Sure.
and time. That's how I would say that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't think we disagree that much on this. But so anyway, so what you were initially saying
Yeah,
before
the
I
challenge is I think that that women expect kind of the moon from men, and we're getting further and further away from being able to kind of do business with each other because the valuation of the relationship is so disparate, as it were. Women want so much and expect so much from the men. Otherwise, they're perfectly content, apparently, to be by themselves and to not pair up or to pair up later in life or to not have children, etc. Like a growing majority of women would rather be single than with an average guy.
what
And the average guy would be happy with an average girl, more or less.
where do you get that statistic from that the average woman would be better would them how do you say the average girl would be prefer to be alone than with an average guy?
Yeah, from the fact that, like, for the first time ever in history, there are more mothers new mothers in their 40s than in their teenage years. That at 30, more than half of women are single and childless. It's like it's from the statistics on a population level.
Oh, I see. I think women though would argue, like I do a lot of street interviews. I don't know if you saw that part of my content where I just go out and talk to people on the street,
Sure.
and that has definitely shifted my perspective on certain things. Like I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of just like random people on the street, which is kind of different than talking to people on the internet because there's different sample biases there. But what women would say, I think a lot of women would say, it's like, well, it seems like guys nowadays they just want to have hookup. They're not really a lot of guys. I was with this guy and I thought it was serious, and then he just left me, and or he cheated on me or whatever. It's like guys can't keep their dicks in their pants. Like they're just looking for hookups. They're not looking for anything serious. That's the argument that like a lot of women who are single in like their 30s or 40s would make.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. I've heard that from women as well, especially on the younger side, and that's part of the dysregulated sexual marketplace that women have fought for decades on some level. That's the dark lining of the freedom and liberation that they currently enjoy, is that it's not unilateral. Men get to have it too. And so the price of a man's exclusive commitment has gone up. And so there's this sort of like standoff that I see in the general culture where both sides are kind of waiting for the other side to be better. And women are waiting for men to grow up and become real men and to learn how to treat a woman and be honorable and learn how to commit, et cetera, et cetera. And women and men are looking to women to be more feminine, to be more loyal, to have lower body counts, to service them sexually in a way that would keep them satisfied and off of the dysregulated sexual marketplace, which is obviously a very high standard to satisfy. And in the absence of the ability to do business, time just goes on and fewer people enter into relationships.
So I would argue, I agree that women's standards might be too high and just have, I think a better way of putting it, like you said, is unrealistic expectations. But I would argue that most guys' standards are too low, not too high. It seems from what I see is the average guy just wants a girl that doesn't beat him and fucks him, and like that's basically where the criteria begin and end. I can say, like, for me, the criteria for a relationship is definitely very strict. Like, I want a girl who's like intelligent, just to be like definitely like on par with me or smarter. Already screens out because I'm so smart. Obviously, screens out a good amount of girls. I want her to be kind. I want her to be empathetic. I want her to be loyal. I want her to have her own life going. I don't want her to just like be like a loser who's sitting on the couch. I want her to be in great shape. Like, so, but I think for most guys, I just see like the criteria is just so low. They'll just take
Yeah.
any girl who's willing to fuck them, pretty
That's
much.
why I say that in general, the average woman is more delusional than the average man, because that kind of pickiness is based on felt optionality. And the average woman has much more optionality than the average man. The average man is not demanding the moon of women because he's just happy that some woman is finally paying him some attention, versus an average woman, even if she really is a 5, if she's very average looking in terms of physicality and she's still under 30, she can be reasonably expected to get a lot of attention from men. It might not be from the men that they would most want that attention from, but clearly when you have lots of potential buyers, you can raise your rate, as it were. And if no one wants to do business with you, you have to be willing to sell for less.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking a very like macroeconomic, logical view of this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I wonder like how much of this is actually like based in like logic and how much of it is just emotions. Like for example, like yeah, you're right. Like a girl who's a 5 will get a lot more attention, like infinitely more attention than a guy who's a 5, right? It's not even close. But if you talk to these girls, here's how they will describe it. They'll say like, yeah, there's random guys at the side of the road who holler at me, or guys who slide in my DMs who say yo sexy, but I don't even consider those meeting options. Like I just, all those guys get automatically screened out and put in the creep zone. And then when you go outside of the creep zone, what they view as a creep zone, to normal guys, it's like I don't really actually have that many options. Like normal guys, or like just normal, who want to have a normal conversation with me, who approach me in a normal way, like those are pretty rare. Like that's what I think a lot of them will say. So they are getting a lot of attention, but in their mind, they just like dismiss all that attention because they don't like the approach the guy's taking.
Well, that is a privilege of getting a lot of attention, is that you can dismiss a sizable majority of it.
Sure.
Whereas men don't have that privilege at that same point of attraction.
Sure.
So you might be correct. That sounds reasonable to me. But you have to understand, again, under basic hypergamous tendencies, that 5 isn't going to want a 5. She's going to be looking for a 6 or above, most likely. And you don't think so?
I mean, some women, sure. What I've always said about hypergamy is that some women are hypergamous and some are not really, and some are somewhere in the middle. But like, I don't know. I feel like you look at me and my girlfriend; she's probably better looking than me. Like, I don't think there's any way of denying that. We make equal amounts of money. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm better than her in terms of like my sexual market value. Uh,
Well, I mean, that's your perspective. I find that to be not often the case. But the way to kind of reconcile that is that men and women are valued for very different things. And ultimately, the value lies in the eye of the beholder. We can certainly presume that if your girlfriend had a better option, she would have pursued it.
I mean, like, there's sometimes like millionaires who want to like take her out and shit. Like, I don't know, she never goes for it. I don't know if that's the case. I think
That's,
there's
sorry to
the
interrupt, but that's an attraction proxy. So that's part of the reductionistic stuff that maybe you were complaining about in the red pill space, is that attraction isn't just based on how much money a man has. And especially now that she's built a relationship with you and has a history, the prospect of starting over, like, hey, I'm from Baton Rouge, I have 2 sisters, I'm interested in psychology, like that's really a big loss on some level. So the man would have to be sufficiently more attractive than you. And not that just doesn't mean he makes more money. A lot of guys think that, I'm not saying you do, but a lot of guys think that as kind of a way of staying in their victim mentality, which is like, oh, I have to be a billionaire in order to get laid. Well, that's never going to happen. So I guess I'm just never going to meet a woman.
Yeah.
And that's not true. It's like women's attraction is based much less on looks and money than a lot of guys think.
Yeah.
It has way more to do with how they feel emotionally.
Yeah, 100%. You're right about that. I guess let me rephrase what I'm saying.
Sure.
I think that a concept that is counter to hypergamy is emotional investment. So if like the reason my girlfriend is like doesn't go for a guy who's whatever, just in any way better than me, is because she's highly emotionally invested, which includes love, but doesn't necessarily need to be just love. She's just very emotionally invested in our relationship. And I think that gives you a good level of protection against hypergamy with a lot of girls. With some girls, it doesn't. Some girls are just like, no amount of emotional investment. Yeah, but those are the girls that you shouldn't be dating in the first place. Those are the girls.
I would agree. Yeah.
Initially, but you take
You're absolutely right. And so that high level of emotional investment or attraction, whatever you want to call it, is a protective factor in your current relationship. But it is a double-edged sword. If for whatever reason that feeling were to change over a long enough timeline, she might not even need a much better guy to be able to be willing to jump ship.
Sure.
Women are much more loyal to their emotions.
If she's checked out of the relationship, sure. I would argue that you can preempt that from happening. You know, if you see the relationship going down the wrong way, sometimes at the end of the day, it just doesn't work out. People grow in different directions, but I think that, like, for example, to me, the reason a lot of cheating happens, specifically when a woman cheats on a man, is less to do with hypergamy and more to do with the fact that there's resentment in the relationship, or that her needs are not being met, whether her sexual needs, her emotional needs, her intellectual needs, that there is, you know, some friction due to something else. Like, that's what I would say often is the cause of cheating, rather than just her monkey brain being like, ooh, this guy is better, I'm gonna fuck him. Like, usually there's also a sizable issue, again, not for all girls, but for most girls, sizable issue within the relationship that the guy is not even cognizant of.
Yes, but I think it might be a chicken and the egg thing. It's like, did that issue cause her to have her attraction lowered, or was her attraction lowered for some other inscrutable reason, and suddenly there are all these issues? It's like, I think when a woman is in love and highly attracted, the guy could insult her to her face and she will giggle and think that he's being funny. The guy could murder people and she would help him hide the body. But there are some like nice guys.
I've actually asked my girlfriend this question.
Every guy has. It's interesting and instructive to ask your girl that question. But I've talked to many, many men who ostensibly seem very loyal, good fathers, dedicated husbands, nice guys, who, like, the woman won't sleep with him because he didn't take out the garbage. You know what I'm saying? So, like, is that really the issue? So
the issue is that they're nice guys. You don't want to be a nice guy. You want to be a kind person, but you don't want to be a nice guy, because nice guy is someone who's a pushover, who's just, you know, who's going to say whatever to get along, to avoid conflict, right? And if you're a nice guy, the girl is ultimately not going to respect you, right? If a girl really respects you, unless she's just like someone who likes to play games, which again is a girl that should be screened out, she's probably not going to withhold sex, you know, for like silly things like that. Or she's not going to withhold sex, period. Like, withholding sex is not healthy. You know, obviously if you're sick or something like that, it's a different story. But like, it's like, oh, I didn't like this thing you did, so I'm going to withhold sex. You're already in trouble if that's what's going on.
Certainly. Yeah, there's no argument there. And I use the term nice guy intentionally because they do have a lot of issues. And sometimes I work with them to get through some of that people-pleasing tendency to their real strength and authenticity. But I guess to my point is that objectively, there doesn't seem to be any real issues in that relationship, but that woman's attraction is very low. And I think the lower a woman's attraction and emotional investment, the more problems there are. And if the man takes those problems at face value and says, oh, well, I just need to take out the garbage and then she'll be happy. Or I just need to, like, be willing to take the kids to daycare twice a week. Or I need to go down on her more. Or I need to support her business idea. And yeah, that'll get the relationship back on track. They're wrong. Yeah. It's like the attraction has fallen and suddenly there are all these problems. And so trying to solve the marital dysfunction on the level of the problems is misguided. It's like treating the symptoms.
No, I agree with what you said. I would say that not always, but a lot of the time, this started with a girl losing respect for the guy. And when a girl loses respect, attraction follows very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And usually, the reason women lose respect for a guy is a lack of boundaries. The guy's just being too much of a pushover, and like, yeah, nothing's just going to make a girl lose respect if you lack boundaries. Like,
Yeah,
you just,
women can't love a man that they don't respect. The
yeah,
two go very closely with each other. And what I've found in my own personal life, paradoxically, is when I've decided to be a little bit more selfish and just said, this is what I want, this is what I'll be able to tolerate. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to say yes to things I don't really want to do. I'm going to say no when I don't want to do things. My relationships have been far more smooth and
yeah.
successful.
100%. Yeah, because you're setting boundaries. What type of boundaries, but you're giving your boundaries, and that women respect that. No, I think your boundaries need to be like semi-reasonable. Like, you hear some red pillars saying like, my boundary is the girl's not allowed to leave the house without me. Like that. That's not gonna work.
Well, it might work for some women. It's like what's reasonable or not is, I think, very culturally dependent. And I think it's just be open. This is what I want to do. And some women are going to go running for the hills, and you shouldn't chase them down. But there's probably a woman out there that would fucking love that kind of arrangement. And it's like people get into BDSM lifestyle marriages, where there's masters and slaves. Like there's all kinds of arrangements and power dynamics that men and women can explore and commit to. So is one reasonable? It's like if they both love it, what's the problem? It's sort of like the Addams family. They're really fucking weird, but they've like leaned into that and they found their weirdo, and their relationship flourishes in a way that the normies around them can't even begin to comprehend.
I think if both parties are into it, then yeah, there's no problem. But if, for example, like the girl really likes you, but you're putting down some like pretty unreasonable boundaries, and then her friends are telling her this guy is crazy, like then you start to kind of run into problems, and she's going along with it. She doesn't really want to, but she likes you, so she's just going to go along with it. Like,
well, that's just nice guy behavior in a woman. So she needs to be able to have her own boundaries as well,
yeah,
or else it doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%. I think another common, let me know what you think about this. I think a common also issue is if you want the girl, or you're invested more in the relationship, especially in the early stages, than the girl is. The girl should be equally as invested, if not more invested, ideally, in the relationship. And like, if you have to convince the girl to date you, like, it's gonna fail.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think that still, even with all of our enlightened ideas about gender roles, there is a strong expectation that the man initiate. The man is going to go approach the woman at the bar.
Oh no, sorry, I don't mean like when I say early stages, I don't mean like approaching the girl or any of that. I agree with you on that. I'm talking about like you guys have been hooking up for a few months, and now it's time to get into a relationship. And let's say like she doesn't really want to date you, but she's maybe open to it, and you really, really want to date her, and you like convince her to get into a relationship.
That's not a good idea. But my point is that if there's a cultural expectation that men initiate, it's generally the one who wants the thing more that initiates action and goes to the other party. And so if men are still generally expected to initiate, they're still starting off from a position of desiring the woman more. But I do think that for long-term success, it's generally, not always, but generally a good idea for the woman to desire the man more. And so there has to be some sort of like script flip that happens in the first few weeks or few months of a relationship, where the man is kind of like initiating and pursuing the woman for some sort of sexual relationship, and then begins to kind of pull back and allow the woman to begin to invest more into the relationship and to pursue him and to kind of enter into his frame. Yeah. But if he should, the only way that you can just sit there and wait for the women to come to you is if you're famous.
No, I totally agree. I think that the flip happens after sex. Typically, that's what I've noticed.
It often does, yeah.
Yeah, like you make her come really far. Like you definitely have to approach the girl. You can't wait around. You have to, move things forward, ask her out, initiate sex, like all of that.
Because that's her power. Women are the gatekeepers of sex, right? And so once the man has kind of cracked that lock, now it comes her time to crack the gatekeep of commitment or relationship that the man holds. And so it's like the woman can kind of, hold off, say, no, I'm not ready, give the guy a run around until sex happens. And then, yeah, the power dynamic does switch considerably.
Yeah. Unless you get really needy. and you start smelling for the girl.
In general, it's a good idea to kind of have that "we'll see" that attitude, especially through the first several months or the first year of a tentative relationship, because things happen, especially in 2025. You think things are going well for 3 months, and then boom, they've ghosted you. You might never hear from that person again. It's like they change very fast in the dysregulated sexual marketplace, and there are no sure things. And so men definitely can get ahead of themselves, especially if they're horny, if they're lonely, if they don't have a lot else going on in their lives. Like in general, the more successful and fulfilling the other aspects of your life, your health, your friends, your career, your family, the less you're really looking for a relationship with a woman to save you and to fulfill you.
Yeah, 100%. One of the big things I teach is that when it comes to like a serious relationship, you want to get into a relationship from a place of abundance. So, like, you want to, like, at least that's the way I've always done it. Like my current girlfriend, right? Like, when I was before we like there was a period of about a year where we were hooking up, but we weren't like dating or anything. Like during that year, I was hooking up with other girls, right? So I came from a place of abundance. And I think that if you don't come from a place of abundance into a relationship, you start overlooking red flags, you start getting needy, and you just fuck up the dynamic. And I think it's important to come from a place of abundance.
I think it's also a vetting test for women. It's like Patrice O'Neill called it getting a soldier on some level. It's like your girl had to stick it out. She had to beat out the other girls that you were dealing with. And so if she stayed through that first year or two, you can be reasonably certain that she really, really wants to have a relationship with you. So much so that she was okay kind of not being chosen in that way and not getting what they want for that long. It's like kind of having an internship before you actually get a job. You must really fucking want that career if you're willing to work for free for a year or two. But so many people, they want a six-figure salary as soon as they enter into the job market. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well said. Actually, I like the analogy of the internship. Yeah, well said. Let me jump to this. So you've spoken about how men lose power through small concessions in relationships. What are these concessions, or what is like the single biggest concession that most men make that they don't even realize they're making?
Yeah, I'm certainly not the only guy in the space to have brought attention to this. It's like I think Rich Cooper talks about the 10,000 little concessions that causes even an alpha to become a beta over time. And I made a recent episode called "The Beginning of the End" that speaks to when this concession process begins in a relationship. And it's generally when the man has reached a point of emotional investment where he becomes scared of losing. He becomes scared of losing that particular woman. And so he starts running defense as opposed to offense. Offense in the sense of keep pushing the relationship in his life forward. He's now defensive and trying to preserve what he's already established. And the more that he plays defense and the more he's loss averse and the more fearful he is of losing that particular woman, the more likely he is going to be monitoring her emotional state more closely, because we know, like we were saying earlier, a woman's love and attraction and emotional investment is like a protective factor of a relationship. And if it starts to fall, he might be worried that he's going to lose the access to that woman in that relationship. And so he starts catering more and more to her emotional state. So I think the big concessions are cohabitation and marriage. And I do think that those arrangements can be beneficial to men. I'm not like anti living together or getting married for all people, but I think it's also fair to say that those arrangements don't work for all people either.
Yeah.
And like Rich Cooper likes to say, I think I agree that men should be their mental point of origin. They should cohabitate and marry because they want to do it. And they should have had that idea independent of their knowledge of their woman's desire for those things. But if they're just doing it to make her happy, or even worse, to keep her from leaving, then they're on the cusp of surrendering such a large portion of their power in their frame that they're unlikely ever to recover it once they're on the other side of that decision. And that often leads to very poor outcomes, both for the man and the family long term, because as the man starts to decline and suffer, the woman's attraction dips and the relationship becomes more unstable.
Yeah. I mean, I think marriage and cohabitation are probably big concessions, right? What about some small concessions?
Well, it always starts with leaving a toothbrush at your house, right? That's sort of like the stereotypical way that things can creep into your life, is that she starts to claim more of your space or your time, even, and you just sort of like go along with it. And
Mm,
that's actually a technique for mate guarding. Men practice all kinds of forms of mate guarding with their woman. Don't go out dressed like that. Uh, I don't want you to go to those nightclubs. But women also practice forms of mate guarding. And one of the biggest ones is they just monopolize his time so that they don't have time to pursue other relationships, even if they're professional relationships or friendships or relationships with their car or with their family. So that's one way that women can kind of like take over a man's life. And most times the guys are kind of like flattered because they like the girl, they're attracted to the girl, and so they kind of go along with it. And this all happens without any kind of explicit discussion or conversation. Does that make
mm.
sense, Alex?
Yeah, it does. So here's my follow-up question, though. I agree. You don't want to just be giving in all the time, giving a bunch of concessions. It's going to make you look weak. You certainly want to have strong boundaries. But at the same time, I think in a relationship, you need to be able to do some give and take. Like
Sure.
it can't be your way or the highway 100% of the time. Uh,
Can.
you need to, so how do you determine what it's a balance, but how do you determine where that balance is
Well,
between?
in the same way that it's a good leader, like think of a good general or a commanding officer, that person isn't just going to send his soldiers on a death march 16 hours a day. It's like it is his way or the highway in the chain of command. And disobedience would be a court martial. They would be hanged. But a good leader knows when it's time for his soldiers to rest, knows when it's, which tasks fit with which soldier's strengths. And it's a pleasure to serve that commanding officer. No one even thinks of it as service because it's a well oiled, functional machine. But absolutely, there is a chain of command and there are consequences to breaking it. So that's kind of my perspective on relationships. Your perspective, give and take, is more of the conventional way of looking at things, and that's fine to do as well. The one caveat that I would give is that I'm not a big fan of compromise, but I am a fan of sacrifice. So this might be like semantic quibbling, but for me, compromise is sort of emotional debt trading, which is like, I don't really want to do this thing, but I know you want to do it. So I'll agree to do this thing that you want that I don't want to do, because I hope that in the future, you'll agree to do something that I want to do that you don't really want to do. And the relationship becomes more and more about at least one person not doing something that he or she doesn't want to do. Right. So I think that in some cases, it is in the best interest of a relationship that you value to voluntarily surrender certain things, which is a sacrifice. And a sacrifice is like a gift, a real gift. It doesn't come with strings attached. Is that I'm not doing this to make you happy. I'm not doing this because I expect that you're going to reciprocate and do the same for me further down the road. I'm doing this because I've examined it. It's now I'm the mental point of origin, and I have decided that I want to do this because I think it's the best thing for us and our relationship. And if you mean give and take in that respect, I agree with you. Yes, that's a good thing for relationships from time to time, for sure.
I mean, I think it has to be like a balance, and the specifics of the give and take are important. So if like the give and take is like, hey, I just want to, there's this cool guy, I just want to go to the movies with him. I'm not gonna like that's not a healthy give and take. Like that's not something you should ever compromise on. But if it's like, for example, like, hey, it would be really beneficial if you went out with me to meet my coworkers, and let's say you don't really want to, right? But it would really help me with my job. And then, like, if the girl is like returning the favor, in many different ways, I think there needs to be some of that where you are kind of meeting in the middle on certain things, but not all things. Some things there should be no leeway on, but some things.
Maybe. Like I think that's probably more appropriate for more egalitarian relationships, which is going to be more based on strict reciprocity. But like I've been invited to girlfriends' family gatherings or professional get-togethers, and I just say no because I have no interest in going. It's like it's my time too. I should want to benefit and enjoy the experience as well, especially if it's taking me away from something that is going to be better for my career or my happiness or health. It's like,
Sure, but don't you like want to like when you love someone, don't you want to do like kind things for them? Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying is that's the sacrifice. Love, as I discussed in the book, is probably the highest form of sacrifice, which
mm.
is I'm now motivated because of my internal feeling to express my kindness towards this person. I'm not doing it because I know that she wants it. I'm doing it because I want to express my kindness.
Oh, okay. I think we're actually then talking about some very similar thing.
It's similar, but I do think that it's a subtle and important distinction, because when people try to make other people happy with their sacrifices, it doesn't work. But often there is happiness in sacrifice. There's happiness in expressing love and kindness for the people that you care about.
Yeah,
As
like if
long as you decide to do it because you want to do it, not because you have to do it, or you think the other person is going to be upset if you say no,
oh
et
yeah,
cetera, et cetera.
and yeah, in that case, I agree. It should be because you want to do it. Absolutely. Like, yeah. Like when I think like my girlfriend's like, hey, my mom's really lonely. Can we invite her to dinner? You know, it's like I wanna make my girlfriend happy, right? I love her. So I'll be like, yeah, sure. Uh, but I also know at the same time that she's done me like a million favors also. So it's like I think you get into a problem where one person is constantly doing things for the other person, but there's no balance. But I think in like a healthy, loving relationship, you should be doing like kind things for each other.
Sure. In a good relationship, a thriving relationship, you're constantly in the process of discharging each other's needs and desires.
Yeah.
But you do them because it's a good match and you wanted to kind of do those things anyway. And it just so happens that you're paired up with somebody who wants to receive the kinds of things that you want to give. And that's a big part of the conflict that happens in long-term relationships, is there's a mismatch between what people want to give and what people want to receive. It's a bad
Yeah.
match.
Yeah. Okay. I think we basically agree on this. Here's the other thing I want to touch on. As you know, especially in the manospheres, red pill community, there's a stigma around therapy and therapists. Uh, I personally try to push back against this pretty heavily by just constantly saying that, hey, I personally went to therapy in the past. It was very helpful. I highly recommend it for not just people who are suffering, but for people who want to improve something. Like it's a good analogy that my old therapist told me is that like basically he's like, look, my job is to just I'm like a programmer. My job is to improve your code. You may have some code that you're not even aware of that's running in the background that's setting you back. And my job is to find that and fix that so you can optimize and have a more successful life. Yeah, I've liked that analogy a lot. But it seems like this obviously is like this stigma still exists. What are your thoughts on that? And like, what do you think is a good way to push back against that? Because there's no doubt that the vast majority of men who are struggling, who probably would benefit massively from therapy, the right therapist.
Certainly, I think that uh, men can and do benefit from therapy. I do think that therapy stereotypically is a very feminized profession. 85% of therapists of all stripes are women,
Mm,
and women are disproportionately the consumers of therapy by like a margin of 4x, which kind of tracks against the numbers of therapists. It's like I think that women, understandably, are more comfortable talking to other women about certain issues, and men, understandably, are more comfortable talking to other men about certain issues, and there's just a dearth of men. But even with male practitioners, because of the way that therapists are trained and the culture of psychotherapy, we still have in the current moment, a very strong emotionally focused perspective, which is like, we're going to process your experience. We're going to work through your feelings and make sense of them. And I think a lot of guys reasonably think that that might be bullshit. Men need a space to do that as well, especially because men have seen some shit. Like some men have really gone through the ringer and they could benefit from a patient, non-judgmental, safe place to really unpack what they've seen and what they felt. But a lot of people are suffering because their lives aren't very good. And maybe their lives aren't very good because their programming is flawed. I mean, mine certainly was when I was younger.
mhm.
Maybe it's a lack of information. maybe they have the right information, but there's some sort of laziness or weakness of character that's preventing them from acting on it. And if their lives got better, if they had more satisfying, loving relationships, if they were professionally successful, they had enough money to not worry about money anymore, that they were in good mental and physical health, that they were in safe, clean, beautiful environments to the extent that that's possible, it's like a lot of their problems might disappear. And so a lot of the work that I do is solution focused. I call what I do therapeutic coaching, because I define my clients' goals in the first 5 minutes of the first consultation. And the goal is to create actionable solutions that they have to implement before the next session to move the ball further down their field. If they don't implement it, it's a problem. We can't continue to work together. If they do implement it and it doesn't work, then obviously we have to fiddle with the knobs to find something that does. It's like, I can't expect them to keep coming back if what I'm advising them to do isn't working. So I think, and this tracks with the data, is women, when they hit upon a difficulty, they're much more likely to use emotional coping strategies, whereas men are much more likely to use problem-solving strategies. Ideally, men and women know how to do both, but I think men need to have an outlet for, like, a trusted advisor. Like, calling what I do a consultation or coaching makes men so much more eager to speak to me than if I call it psychotherapy, just because of the associations around that term. Does that answer your question? I know I rambled a little bit there.
No, it kind of does, but I would just say like that the stigma around therapy is not only hurting men, it sometimes is killing men. Like, there's definitely some suicides that could have been prevented if the man got professional help. And
Sure.
I think it's just a shame that this stigma exists, especially in certain communities. And that's why I've been like really outspoken about the fact that, like, hey, I did therapy, help me. Like,
It's very beneficial. Like, it's one of the few things that I think saved my life. Like, but I did have to do twice weekly therapy for 7 years. That's how serious I was depressed. And I also had to go through a number of therapists before I found the one that worked for me.
Sure.
So that's another thing to consider, is that finding a good therapist is sort of like a dating process.
Yeah.
According to the research, the vast majority of the effectiveness of the treatment is based on the goodness of fit, the strength of the relationship between the client and the doctor, regardless of the therapeutic modality. Like, you can get good outcomes with psychodynamics, CBT, DBT, behavioral, all kinds of things. But you have to like your therapist, and you have to feel like your therapist likes and cares about you too. And you might have to date around a little bit, and that gets expensive and time consuming, which is another reason why people don't do that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: have you ever heard of TMS, transcranial therapy? Right. I think it's
transcranial magnetic field therapy or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, I have. It has very good outcome measures associated with intractable or severe depression. It can be very expensive. Oh, you've done it?
Yeah, I did it personally. I did 50, 60 sessions, and it permanently cured my OCD type of anxiety and just my anxiety in general. Like, and also largely 80% got rid of like any depression episodes I had. It was the biggest game changer I've ever done for my own mental well-being. And that includes like so many different things. It was miraculous. Like,
right on, man. Well, I'm glad that really worked for you. Unfortunately, I don't know. I think it's hard to get insurance reimbursement for that treatment still, even though it's shown to be effective. It's a fairly expensive treatment. And I think a lot of providers are loath to, you have to fail a lot of other treatments, I think, for an insurance company to give you the green light for transcranial.
Yeah. Like, my insurance did cover it, but there was still a copay of like $40 every time, which,
that's nothing. I mean, that things cost tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, when my insurance only covered 40 sessions. So after that, it was cash price of $75 per session. But, I think it depends obviously on the therapy practice, and I knew these people really well. But yeah, you're right. It is pretty tough to get insurance to cover it. It's unfortunate because I think it's like really like something that can help like so many people.
We're on the cusp of all kinds of new therapeutic interventions. I mean, the use of psychedelics is also really interesting and exciting, and that's becoming more mainstream. And I think that we're going to get more personalized biological interventions in the next 10 to 20 years, and hopefully much more effective and less habit forming than the psychiatric meds that we have today.
Yeah, for sure. I think also here's like a big piece of advice I give is like your depression might not just be psychological. It could very well be largely physical, if not predominantly. Like if your vitamin D is super low, you can feel depressed. If your testosterone is very low, if your thyroid is very low, like there's so many things physically that could be off with you and are likely to be off just due to the modern diet and modern lifestyle. And I think like you want to like I think that's where you should start is figure out exactly what your health is at, your physical health, and then fix all that, and then see what mental issues you still have left over.
Certainly, and that's an ethical and reasonable practice. Is if a patient presents with depression, is you suggest that they get a workup, and I think that we can go even further. It's like, yeah, maybe your depression is caused by low thyroid hormone. And you fix that, great. Now you feel like your old self again. Wonderful. But like try to fix all the other parts of your life that might not be working. Now, of course, it might be hard to fix those parts of your life because you're feeling depressed, but maybe you're depressed because you have low T, but maybe you're also depressed because you don't get physical exercise, or you haven't had a moment of authentic connection with another human being in a month, or you are constantly worried about living from paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
So it's like fix the problems that you can. Maybe you're actually responding in a reality-based way to your circumstances, including your own biology and physiology. And it's still possible for people's lives to look wonderful on the surface and to have fantastic panels all within the normal range and still be depressed. And then it becomes very highly a psychological problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
according to the research, one more thing that might be useful to your listeners. So if you look at the criteria for MDD, major depressive disorder, there's probably like 9 symptoms. And some of them are much more psychological or cognitive, like suicidal urges or pervasive sense of hopelessness. Some of them are more what we call vegetative, and it has to do with like hypersomnia, you're sleeping 12 hours a day, or you just don't have very low mood or low energy levels. And according to the research that I've read, the more of the vegetative symptoms a person has, the more likely there's going to be a biological origin to that depression.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there's definitely some interesting studies in this field. Like two that stood out to me was that going to the gym was found to be as effective as SSRIs when it comes to depression. That was interesting.
Surprised, man. Like people need cardio; they should lift some weights, man. I got into lifting weights far too late in my life. It's actually extremely therapeutic.
It is, yeah, for sure. And then the other one is that having a dog actually is more effective at curing depression than SSRIs. Dogs
are great, man. I mean, in some
awesome.
cases, they're better than people. There's a reason we call a man's best friend. They can be so loving, and for some people, it's the closest they'll ever come to being seen and accepted unconditionally for who they are. Because dogs just love their owners in the vast majority of cases.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump through some questions. How long can you stay on for?
I would booked it out for 90 minutes. So okay, cool. We have about another 25 minutes or so.
Yeah, that should be enough. All right, let me just address one question for the chat. This is like the dumbest lie ever. Apparently, that Indian P made out with someone, and then I told blah blah blah. I offered Greg $10,000 if he can prove that and show the screenshots, and he's not going to do it. So that tells you all you need to know. All right. Anyway, next.
I have no idea what that was about.
Yeah, it's just it's irrelevant. It's just something from my chat.
All right.
All right. Let's jump to this. How come young, attractive women can be attracted to older guys that are in relationships? It's so surprising how many young girls have affairs with married guys with kids. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit ago, is that women want what other women want. And when a man is married, he has at least one woman who says, this man is so good and so attractive and such a fantastic possible mate that I've decided to commit the rest of my life to him and him alone. which is a very strong endorsement for that man. I've talked to numerous men who, as soon as they put on a ring, started to get approached by women on the regular. Now, some of that was because these women felt that the man was now safe because he wouldn't cross that line, and so that they could have a kind of a social interaction. Some of the women had more devious designs. But a married man just signifies that this guy has what at least one woman really wants. And so that might be a clearer target than a guy who's unattached. Because for better or for worse, it takes longer to get to know whether a man is attractive than if a woman is attractive. From a man's perspective, so much of what makes a woman attractive is based on her youth, her physical appearance, her physique, her face, her immediate presentation. But it's hard for even rich guys to know what their true net worth is. You know what I'm saying? They have to have accountants figure that out, and they work for a week to get to that number. You have to, in San Francisco, the homeless people look like the billionaires in terms of how they dress. So it's very,
Really?
yeah, they're all kind of dressed in, sweatshirts, and they're not dressed in suits and in brand names and things like that. That would be a gauche in the tech crowd. So my point is that it's much harder to tell an attractive man on sight than an attractive woman. So one way that women can, like a heuristic, a shortcut that they can use to figure out who the attractive men are who's paired off with whom and how attractive is his wife. The more attractive his wife is, the more attractive that man is presumed to be.
Yeah, I don't really even have anything to add to that. All right, let's see. What's the next question? There's just a lot of discussion. Okay. The issue is women have abundance of high quality options due to dating apps. Simply sleeping with them isn't an effective method of retention like it was in 2005. I disagree with that. I think that when you sleep with a girl, it's not a guarantee, but she becomes a lot more invested. The average body count for a woman nowadays is like 8. Okay, it's not like super high. I think 6 or 8, I forget, but one of
I
those
heard
two.
it was 8, but my feeling is that the number is a little higher than that. But I have read that study. I don't think it's much higher. Maybe it's like 11.
Yeah,
But
it might be a little higher. I agree with you on that. I mean, this is like a game I play a lot where like, especially if I'm dating a girl, not that like this is a big thing for me, but like I'm like, so what's your body count?
oh
And
wow, just going for it, huh?
yeah, well, this is after like we've already hooked up a few times, but anyway, it's more just out of curiosity, and generally I find it's somewhere between 5 and 15 for most women.
Yeah, I don't usually ask the women that I've dated because I don't ever truly expect a fully honest answer, and I don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of how they're defining who they count and who they don't. Um, I talked to a guy who is based in the Republic of Georgia, which apparently is one of the most Catholic nations in the world, where
Mhm.
virginity in women is still very, very important, and a non-virgin woman would functionally be unable to find a husband in that culture. But that just means that their hymen is intact, and these women might be doing all kinds of other sexual acts with dozens and dozens of men and still be considered a virgin.
Yeah,
So body count is misleading. We're using it as a proxy for, let's say, purity, and it's an imperfect metric. Let's put it
oh,
that
for
way.
sure. Yeah, yeah. This is more just for my curiosity than any kind of objective metric. I would say though that there is ways you can ask the question that are more likely to guarantee an honest answer.
Oh yeah,
Or
how?
well, like for example, the girl will typically like when I ask her, she'll be like, "Oh, what's yours?" And I'll just be like, "I don't know, like 300 to 400." She's like, "No fucking way." I'll be like, "Yep, I used to be a slut, still am to some extent." And like when a girl hears that, she is more likely, I think, to give the real number when she sees like, okay, well, this guy's fucked around a lot. He's probably not going to judge.
And her number is unlikely to be higher than yours, which is another very important thing. Like that would be very awkward,
That
I
would
think.
be really, yeah.
It's like, let's say our numbers on the count of 3 and the guy says 5 and the girl says 500. It's like, it's going to be
Yeah.
a rough date.
Most, well, I mean, I remember one, what was she, like 20-year-old that I met whose body count was like 300 plus. So there are exceptions, but most girls generally find are either middle single digits or low double digits in the teens somewhere. But Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, sure, especially in like religious countries, they're doing, for example, like anal, and they're just not counting that. I
Yeah,
have a
that's what
friend
the guy in
from
Georgia told me, among other things. Yeah.
yeah, I have a friend from Iran. Persian culture, and it's basically the same thing. The girls will like actually like have a lot of anal there, just to avoid like losing their virginity. So, yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. Uh, how can you find out if a woman is on the spectrum or not? Example, it's widely undiagnosed. That's a good question. What do you think?
I don't know. It feels like I have the kind of the opposite perspective. It feels like today everyone is either on the autistic spectrum or has some form of ADHD or some kind of trauma. Like it's rare to find somebody who doesn't self-identify in one of those three categories in 2025. So maybe that's because autistic spectrum disorder, as it is known now, which we just started calling it that, like maybe less than 10 years ago, was wildly underdiagnosed until 2015 or so. But it seems very common these days, where anything that's um, in any way remotely peculiar is now puts somebody on the autistic spectrum, and I think that that is dangerous. How do I find out if a woman is on the spectrum or not? I think the main way is to pay attention to how oblivious she is to societal norms. A woman who's on the spectrum, or a man who's on the spectrum for that matter, will say things that they believe are reasonable, but uh, they don't really read the mood in the room. They don't really take into account another person's feelings. Um, and they don't do it because they feel like cocky and arrogant. They just are kind of oblivious to the impact of their words or their attitudes. Um, I think that's probably the best, is sort of like obliviousness to emotional impact.
I never really think about this. I think that if a woman, a girl who's mildly on the autism spectrum is like, I don't think it matters. What matters is borderline personality disorder, BPD. And if you get that, that's a girl you should avoid. Um,
Well, certainly, and it's very hard to confuse BPD with ADD, autistic or ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. But I would
yeah,
say that BPD is obviously a very serious problem, and yeah, you probably should not move forward with committing to that woman or investing a
definitely.
lot of emotional energy. But it's not the only problem. Like being involved with a highly depressed woman
Yeah,
is life sucking. Being involved with a highly anxious woman who could never be reassured, it's like
sure.
you're going to be walking on eggshells. Your life's going to be miserable. So it's like there's many ways
Uh,
that our programming can be off. And if you bring that person closer, you are going to suffer as a consequence of that. It's like, the people in your immediate circle should be very well vetted. They should be
mhm.
stable. They should be adding value. They should be competent. They should be loving. Otherwise, just keep them at a distance if you want to engage with them at all.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that also another thing that's really important to watch out for in a girl, especially when it comes to like a serious relationship, is does she have a victim mindset? I know I've talked about this a good amount, but if a girl has a victim mindset, she will never ever take accountability. Everything will always be your fault. No matter how badly she fucks up, it's always going to be your fault. It's just you never want to date a girl who has a victim mindset. That's
Yeah,
just
I've mentioned that in a number of my interviews. I think I made an episode about it too a long time ago, though I forget what it's called. In psychology, we technically call that externalizing. And yes, it's impossible to have a satisfactory, fulfilling, stable relationship with an externalizer because it's never their fault. They never take responsibility. They're never they cannot even accept that their emotional reactions have their origin in themselves. That's why we call it externalizing. They just think that you made me mad.
Mhm.
You made me sad. You made me anxious because of what you did and didn't do. And so, because I can't control my own emotions, and because I see the origin of those emotions coming from outside of me, I'm going to try to control you. I'm
Mhm.
going to try to control you so you don't do the thing that makes me feel the way that I feel. Instead
Yeah.
of looking inside and really questioning, well, why do I feel the way that I feel? And taking responsibility for that reaction and making a decision to move forward one way or the other in a reality based way.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of taking your time when it comes to getting into like a serious relationship.
Certainly.
Like, I like to hook up with a girl on the first date, but when it comes to dating, I will take my time, at least a few months. Like with my current girlfriend, it was about a year, but that might be a bit overkill. But yeah, at least a few months. And one of the
At
things
least
I
6 months is what I say. 6 to 12 months. I think a year is not too long of a time, to be honest. If you want to
yeah,
really vet for a long-term relationship or a life partner, what's 1 year in the context of the rest of your life?
no, I agree. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be like a year, but like
It
yeah,
doesn't
I
have to
agree
be
with
like 12 months,
yeah.
365 days on the
Yeah,
dot.
yeah.
No,
I agree with your range. But the point I'm making is that like that's one of the things I will look for is does she take responsibility for shit? Does she take accountability? Or does she just always is she always the victim? I think there's just these things that you should look for that guys often do not even pay attention to. Like another example would be is she constantly cycling through friends? Or does she have friends that have been around for 15, 20 years? Or is it like every time she's fighting with one of her friends, she's getting new friends, she's fighting with that friend? Like that's a huge thing in of itself.
yeah, I know some girls who are like disowning their friends, they can't get along with their coworkers, they can't keep a relationship, and they still find it difficult to examine how they might be the common denominator to all of those situations.
Yeah, victims will never want to accept any kind of responsibility. It's never their fault.
And it's not good for them. I mean, again, no
It's
one
not.
can grow from a place of a victim, and they're trapped and they're suffering. But I don't know if they lack the skills or the incentives to get out of that position. But yeah, nothing will change for them until they decide enough is enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I think victims are so tricky to help.
I used to
Um,
have that a little bit when I was younger. I think a lot
yeah,
of
me
people
too.
do.
Yeah.
And I remember suffering what I perceived to be a betrayal from some of my friends in my early 20s. And initially, my reaction was to have a little bit of a pity party and to wallow in my hurt feelings. But eventually, I had to say, like, well, who fucking decided to be friends with these people?
Mhm.
It was me. I had to look at the man in the mirror. And this was a catalyst for me taking what I call radical responsibility for my life. It's like my life is 100% my fault. 100%. My best thinking had brought me to that point. My best decision making had created a life that I was living. And if I'm unhappy with that, I need to make different choices. And I put the locus of agency in my own actions. And I still have that to today. And that's been one of the most important lessons that I've learned to turn my life around.
Mm,
Radical responsibility. You're 100% to blame for your life.
yeah. Have you ever read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing?
No, but I'm familiar with Jocko, online. Another really inspiring guy for sure.
Yeah, I really like his book Extreme Ownership, and just talks about how basically the premise is that how much better your life can be long term if you accept responsibility for everything, even things that may not seem like they're even your fault. Like let's say you're a boss and one of your employees fucks up. You know, it's tempting to be like, "Oh, this fucking employee sucks," but taking accountability for what you can control, it's like, "Hey, maybe I made a mistake when I hired him, or maybe I didn't give him instructions, or maybe I didn't motivate him enough, or maybe, like, yeah, I think that concept is really good and encourages
Exactly. Sounds
success.
like very aligned with what I discovered when I was younger.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, I went through like partial victim, I don't know, mindsets when it came to certain areas. I think when it came to like my dating life, or maybe in the beginning, but like later on when I was like 21, 22, I always took action, never saw myself as a victim. But when it came time to my career, I kind of had a little bit of a victim mindset until like 24 or so, 23, 24. I remember a specific moment, which is like always going to stick with me, where one of my like best friends, this is when I lived in LA, he took me on this like mountain. He's like, "Hey, let's go for a drive." And he just let me have it. He's like, "Bro, like the reason your career sucks right now is not because of the things you think. It's just because you haven't taken this or this action." And that like I was receptive to it. And then started taking more accountability. And then my career just evolved. I started becoming, I went from being commission only to getting salary to making six figures working for a solar company. But yeah, only because I started taking accountability for the things I was kind of blaming on. It's like, oh well, fucking, my college didn't teach me anything. This solar sales is so competitive. Like it was just blaming other people.
Or my parents weren't generous enough. They didn't love me. They fucked me up. That's a big one for young people. People have to forgive their parents. Well, good on you for being receptive to your buddy's harsh feedback, because a number of other people wouldn't have been.
Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, it was at a time in my life where I was really into self-development. So, yeah, it was like when I learned about self-development, it was like a drug. And then I just like went down the rabbit hole and started reading all the books and just watching all the videos. And it was like, it was kind of very empowering because before that, I thought that like, no, this is the way things are. This is how I was born, and that's how things are going to stay. And then when I heard stories of other men who started off in a similar place as me, who improved, who overcame their obstacles, I was like, holy shit, if they can do it, I can probably do it too.
Totally. That was what helped me in many respects. I saw my friends start to succeed, and I thought, well, geez, these guys aren't any better or worse than I am. If they can do it, I can fucking do it. And that's a really powerful attitude to have. There's a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, mindset is everything. That feels very cliche, and there is a lot of fluff in the self-development space, but it's true. Like, you tell me your mindset, and I will tell you what your life looks like, and vice versa.
Yeah. No, for sure. Here's another question for you. What are some things Orion disagrees with the red pill on?
I don't know. I mean, the red pill means 10 different things to 10 different people. Like we started
That's
this
true.
conversation, it seems like you and I are looking at different corners of the pill.
Yeah, that's
The
true.
part that I really disagree with is the black pill stuff, which I think is sometimes the natural consequence of looking at certain sectors of the red pill, is that you will inevitably end up in the black pill. And I do think that things are not nearly as hopeless as all that, and that
Oh,
people can learn to have satisfying, loving relationships with the opposite sex, with the same sex, if that's your thing. And that there are good men out there and there are good women out there, and you can find them and enter into relationships with them for sure. But you might have to change how you fish and where you're fishing. Let's put it
yeah.
that way.
I agree. The black pill is the worst. Just the people who are in this community, especially the ones who've like really gone down that rabbit hole, it's like talking to them. It's just you're just talking to like a bot. Like they just have such a negative view on dating, and just the idea is like if I'm not this Chad, that my dating life is going to suck unless I go to a third world country and get like a prostitute or something. Yeah,
Yeah, I think what I disagree with the red pill is not the actual red pill content as much as the interpretation of the red pill content. Like, for example, we can say with very reasonable certainty that if we present a woman with two men who are absolutely identical in every other respect except their income, and this guy makes 30,000 a year and this guy makes 30 million a year, the woman is going to prefer the richer man, all other things being equal. So we know that being rich is generally preferred to being poor in a very controlled experiment with respect to women's sexual preferences. That is undeniable and irrefutable. But the interpretation of that is, oh, I just have to be a millionaire in order to get laid. And that's not true. And I've worked with plenty of millionaires who still have trouble getting laid because they thought that once they started to make seven figures, or they bought a Ferrari or they had a yacht, that the woman would just be lining up to fuck them. And that's not how women work. It's like, even at that level, you can't just lean back and use these proxies as a tool to shortcut female attraction and arousal.
Yeah.
You can't cut in line.
This is how I kind of always viewed money when it comes to dating. I think that there's massive diminishing returns at a certain point. So I think that if you're a guy who's broke and you go from being broke to being middle class, your dating life will improve because you're going to live closer to in a nicer place, closer to the city. You're going to probably have more free time on your hand. Maybe you're going to have a car so you can like actually pick a girl up or whatever. Like I think there, but once you get past like upper middle class, past like 200K a year or 150K a year, I think you get massive diminishing returns. And I've also had like some really, really wealthy clients who are the only girls they're getting are prostitutes or girls that
I don't see it there. Like, I think that I agree with you about diminishing returns on more money for sexual optionality, but I think it's higher than just a couple 100,000. I do, but you certainly don't need 100 million. I think go ahead.
What would you say is like, let's take a guy who makes 200K a year and a guy who makes 2 million a year. What exactly would you say? What exactly is the advantage that the 2 million guy has over the 200K guy when it comes to dating?
lifestyle extrapolation. So the 2 million is going to be flying first class. The 2 million guy is going to be staying in better hotels, eating at nicer restaurants. The 2 million guy is probably not an employee because it's very hard, if not impossible, to make that kind of salary. If he's making 2 million as an employee, he's already the president of a bank or a CEO somewhere. And so he's probably very old, and there's other things going on in that dynamic. So he probably has time. So those are some of the big differences. I do think that the main thing is, so like, what are the highest salaried jobs? That would be like cardiologist or brain surgeon, and they make like 800,000 to 1.2 million a year in the US. That's like the highest you can get, the highest status job that you can have in America. If you can have more than that, you enter into a different kind of life because you can't be an employee anymore. You're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, and that's a very different kind of life as well, which generally has to do with more freedom, location, and time independence. Because a lot of these cardiologists have the money, they have the car that they can never drive, they have the house that they never see. They're on some level because they're working 60, 70 hours a week, and it's a very high stress job. So if I think the diminishing return cutoff is after like around 2 million, to be honest. Like if you're making 2 million a year, you might as well be making 200 million a year. It's like, it's not going to make a big difference, but there is still a difference between 200,000 and 800,000 between a guy who's a project manager at a tech company and a guy who's a cardiologist. And there's a difference between a cardiologist and a very successful entrepreneur who's making 7 figures a year, because it's not just about the money at that point, it's about the possibilities of lifestyle. That's my perspective anyway.
I would largely disagree with that, probably. I think there probably will be some difference, but I think if we count, I think the big variable is like how much time you have. And if we take a business owner who makes 200,000 a year and a business owner who makes 2 million a year, and let's say they both work 40 hours a week, right? We count for that factor. We count for time. I don't think there's going to be a big difference, like all other factors being equal. I don't think there's going to be a big difference between their dating results and dating outcomes.
Maybe. I doubt that the person making 200,000 is working the same hours as the guy who's working 2 million. Though I think that actually the guy who's making 200,000 is working more than the guy who's working 2 million, because
maybe, but it seems like every like super rich person I meet who's like a millionaire works like really fucking like still works a lot, like still works crazy hours.
They work because they want to, they delegate a lot of that if they choose to. They don't have a boss. They don't have, except for their own ambition and drive, which is part of what makes them attractive. I think I got time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, sure. Let's move on.
This has been really fun, man. This has been a good talk.
Yeah, man, for sure. You're welcome back anytime. I'd love to continue and do more Q&A and shit. Why is Orion more open to cold approach and pickup versus most conventional, I guess, like people in your career? Jordan Peterson called PUA psychopaths. Curious what got Orion approaching. I don't understand that last part, but I think I understand the general.
Firepod, he's saying we had a great conversation, man. That's what the kids are saying these days.
But yeah, so the question is like, why are you more open to some of the cold approach and pickup concepts than like other people in your position?
Sure, because I know that good things can come from cold approach. Good things can come in the form of outcomes. Like you can actually access more attractive women in certain contexts than you might be able to access on a dating app in the privacy of your own home by doing cold approach. It's also very positive about the character and confidence building that goes on in a man. Like the ability to know that you can go up to a woman, initiate a conversation with another attractive human being, and potentially successfully lead that encounter in the direction of a sexual experience is a fucking game changer for a man. It makes the guy feel like $1 million or king of his own little empire. And obviously that could potentially go to a guy's head. It can be gamified. I think that's what Peterson was talking about with respect to the PUA psychopaths, is that some people just get trapped in the game. It's a form of greed, just like some people, they never have enough money and they're just making money to make money. Some PUA people can get trapped in just like pulling women. They don't even want the women anymore. They're not even attracted to the women. They just need to pull. They just need to keep playing. But that's a form of addiction, or you can even call it a sin. Jordan Peterson would probably call it a sin, the sin of lust. Like the business owner would be the sin of greed. That's a disordered, distempered personality. But the ability to have the skills to strike up a conversation and a relationship with a stranger are invaluable, especially as more and more of our society goes online and people lose access to those skills and the principles of developing them. Like the ability as a man to be able to approach a woman in a bar already puts you in the top 3% of men in Gen Z. Like fewer than 5% of Gen Zers are cold approaching.
Yeah.
I'm just pulling that number off of my head. I didn't read that somewhere, but it does seem to be going down. Like it's much less common than it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's really useful because A, you can get access to women in the here and now, which is the best benefit of cold approach, is that you can shoot your shot. That woman that you're looking at across the bar, she might not be on the apps. You might not have the same social circles. You'll never just circulate and see each other. And she might be an Instagram. She might have a closed Instagram account or an account with 100,000 followers, but here you are, for whatever reason, at the same place at the same time. You can access this woman in a way that you would not be able to access her online. And you can potentially have the confidence that no matter what happens, I can leave this woman better than I found her. I can have a pleasant interaction with another human being to not be crushed by her lack of interest or her rejection. And even better, create a new relationship that could benefit my life. Like there's a lot of good that comes from cold approach.
Yeah, no, well said, man. The one thing I would add to what you said is that cold approach can also benefit your life and will benefit your life in areas outside of dating, getting jobs, right? If you're good at cold approach, you're going to be good at talking to people. You're more likely to get a job. Like a big part of getting a job is how much the person interviewing likes you. Like this is just a huge part. Networking, it's going to be a huge thing. Like I feel like learning cold approach really benefited me in like pretty much every area of my life, like anything, because I think a lot of things are social in nature, and the climb to the top requires social skills.
You cannot do it alone. Like I've learned that lesson too late in life. You need other people for sure. And absolutely, it's like PUA or cold approach is just a subset of general sociability or gregariousness. The other part that maybe Jordan Peterson was talking about was the kind of like applied psychology manipulation tactics that a lot of PUA use in a non-authentic, non-good actor way. And I'm more of you can be authentic and open and vulnerable and also playful and fun without having to like use tricks in order to deceive a woman into sleeping with you. And I think that that's probably what he's talking about, which is a subsection of the PUA community.
It's a subsection, but I think the majority of people in the PUA community would believe in being authentic. They wouldn't believe in like using tricks or whatever.
And the majority of men that I've talked to who have trained with PUA communities did so because they were kind of shy, nerdy, or introverted, and they didn't like their prospects for the rest of their life if they didn't get over it. And it's like, how is that a problem? How is that a problem for those men? How is it a problem for the women who now get access to more men who might be a appropriate match for them? Like everybody wins when guys become more confident and social.
Yeah, I've told my girlfriend this, like, hey, if I didn't go down this pickup journey, you would not have liked me. We would not be together right now.
Sure, I believe it.
But yeah, man, dude, this was a really, really good chat.
It was, Alex. I had a great time. I don't know what I was expecting, but this was a pretty high level and nuanced conversation. So good on you for directing it in that way.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing, the advice. I'd be more than happy to do another one. We can do more Q&A or whatever. But do you want to quickly plug your channel, tell people where they can find you?
Oh, yeah, sure. So if you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Orion Taraban. I run a YouTube channel called PsycHacks. It has about 830,000 subscribers now. So that's where you can find my long-form content. I post original episodes every week. I also have a book called The Value of Others, where I really dive deep into my economic model of sexual relationships. It's doing very well on Amazon. You can find it on all the platforms, ebook, audiobook, paperback. I have a paid member community as well, where I host live group consultations and do Q&As with invited guests as well, called the Captain's Quarters. You can check all that out on my website.
Awesome.
PsycHacks.com.
Yeah, guys, subscribe to his YouTube channel. Let's get him to 1 million. Let's get him that gold plaque. But yeah, cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, man. And we'll be in touch. All right, guys. Appreciate it all. See you guys later.